Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider post-game show from The Advocate. I'm Zach Ewing with one of our LSU beat writers, Reed Darcey, the one who was not at Kyle Field tonight in that chaos, I guess, at the end of that game, we'll say. Well, we got a lot to dissect tonight. LSU loses to Texas A&M 38-23, and it was really just kind of a tale of two halves, Reed. LSU totally in control of this game, up 17-7 at halftime, even midway through, maybe not quite midway through the third quarter, but 5-6 minutes into the third quarter, still up 17-7, had the ball, think they're in control. And then all of a sudden, just everything that could change did change.
It flipped very quickly. At the start of the second half, you felt good about LSU's chances of winning the game. You saw that they played well in the first half, that their defense was flying all over the place, getting all kinds of pressure on Connor Wegman. And Nussmeier was really good in the first half. He made some great throws on third down. He completed some explosive passing plays. He led LSU on a couple scoring drives. LSU did miss some chances in the first half, but you liked where they stood at the start of the second. And I think you could pinpoint exactly where it started to unravel for LSU. It's when Nuss threw his first interception. And we can sort of get into the reasons of how that happened and why that happened. But I think the whole game flipped on that one play because A&M went and scored right after that, and then they never looked back. So that's when it all flipped.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I mean, it's kind of rare in a game like this. You can pinpoint to one moment that happened. It's one thing if it happens with a minute to go and you say, okay, that was the difference. Freddie Freeman hits a grand slam. That's why they won the game. But this one was in the third quarter, and it was really the point where it all changed. So let's set a couple things up. You are welcome to leave your comments or questions for us. We'll see if any of the guys from College Station can join the show later. We will show your comments and questions on the screen as they come in, as long as they're not super long. I'm not going to show a comment that's going to take people several minutes to read. I'm also not going to show anything that is not clean. So keep it clean. Connie says need quarterback. I don't know about that. I mean, at halftime, I'm sitting here thinking if LSU is going to start Garrett Nussmeier's Heisman campaign. He had 259 yards and 2 touchdowns at halftime against a great defense on the road, hostile environment. Like, he could not have been playing better. And then, it just flipped, and we'll dig into that. But continue to leave your comments and questions. We do want you to be part of the show. Also want to let you know, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, or if you're watching on Facebook, also subscribe to the LSU Sports on NOLA.com YouTube channel. We do these post-game shows after most Saturday games. Also have 2 LSU Insider podcasts per week, pretty much all year round. Even in the summer, we're doing a podcast every week talking LSU sports. So subscribe to that channel, and we appreciate you joining up. Also want to let you know that the post-game show is brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. Okay, so it's crazy that Nussmeier's interception, you talked about, he throws the ball up for grabs. And I think let's just stick with Nuss for now, because after that throw, he seemed kind of rattled, Reed. You can see his completion percentage there in the second half was under 50%. So, some of that was they were chasing the game late, and A&M knew they had to pass. But even his completions, like I remember he threw a third down completion to Kyron Lacey where Lacey had to almost catch the ball off his shoe tops, and it was a pretty easy throw. He missed some other receivers. Like he was not himself after that first interception.
No, he was not. I think those throws, those 3 interceptions, all of them are as bad as it gets. He'll definitely probably say post game that he wants all those throws back, and that there's no excuse for making those throws. For a player who's been in college as long as he has, for a guy who's started all season and with the arm talent that he has, there's no reason he needs to be making those kinds of throws. But in Nussmeier's defense, LSU could not run the ball at all. It had to rely solely on Nussmeier's arm and his ability to make plays, especially when the defense took away his first read. LSU couldn't run the ball. It couldn't stay in front of the chains. It couldn't get any kind of efficient ground game going. I looked at the stats here. This includes sacks. But they finished with 23 carries for 24 yards. And I looked at him like, oh man, that's probably because Nussmeier got sacked a lot. No, he only got sacked twice, right?
Yeah.
So, that adjusted for sacks, they still averaged 1.9 yards per carry. That's not going to cut it. We talked about it this week, Zach. I mean, that was the key to the game. LSU needed to run the ball. It did not run the ball, and it looked like in the first half that LSU might be able to survive that. They might be able to overcome the lack of a run game. But it all fell apart in the second. I think it starts with the run game. If Nussmeier had that as a crutch to lean onto, maybe he doesn't throw those interceptions. Maybe he stays a little more comfortable, a little more confident, and he can just calm down a little bit. I think if LSU had a decent run game to rely on, maybe some of those mistakes don't happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's going to be a lot of attention on Nussmeier and the 3 interceptions. And like you said, he wants those throws back, I'm sure. He was not good in the second half. Thought he missed a lot of throws. But that is part and parcel with what you see on the screen right now, what you just mentioned, Reed, is that they 24 yards and 23 carries. And even taking away the sacks, like Caden Durham had 15 carries or 15 yards on 11 carries. Josh Williams was slightly better, 7 carries, 23 yards. I think he had like a 10 or 12-yard run early that boosted that up a little bit. And that was it. I mean, they could not run the ball. And when you're talking about a pretty good defense already that knows you can't run the ball, and is forcing Nussmeier to make those throws. Now, when you're up 17-7, you can kind of get away with that. You can still run on first down, maybe throw a short pass, still kind of keep the play action game as part of your arsenal. And you don't need to score points. You can get a couple first downs punted away. Your defense is playing well. And so that kind of leads me to the other thing that happened when this game flipped. And it's crazy. It all happened at once. And I'm sure Texas A&M was planning on making this making the switch at quarterback anyway, but it was just coincidental the way it worked out. Nussmeier throws that interception where, you just got to throw that ball away or try to scramble for the first down on 3rd and 2. Instead, he throws the pick. Texas A&M returns it inside the 10-yard line, and then the Aggies make the switch from Connor Wegman to Marcel Reed, and Marcel Reed was absolutely electric. He ran for a touchdown on the very first play of that drive, cut the lead to 17-14. A&M gets the ball back. He leads another touchdown drive, runs for another touchdown, gives Texas A&M the lead. Nussmeier throws another interception. 2 plays later, he's got his 3rd touch. I mean, it was like Tecmo Bowl. I mean, it like you could not stop him. He was running for touchdowns on every drive.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how A&M changed the entire structure and foundation of their offense in a snap, right? I mean, it happened so quick. They turned themselves into a completely different offense from the moment they subbed out Connor Wegman for Marcel Reed. And Marcel Reed, he's only a freshman. He did not look like a freshman. He was incredible. LSU had no answer for him. It sort of makes you think like, I doubt, like, this is pretty far-fetched. I don't think Mike Elko planned this out, like, oh, I'm going to start Connor Wegman in the first half and then bring Marcel Reed in second. I don't think that's how it happened, but maybe he had this in the back of his mind, like, hey, if the offense is struggling in the first half, I need to have a plan B. We need to have an offensive structure in place in case we do want to make that change, right? I bet you he thought about that during the week because they were so prepared just to turn on a dime, right, and change everything about their offense. LSU couldn't stop the read option. They were not prepared for that. Marcel Reed did a great job reading them. He did not look like a freshman on those the handoffs, the mesh points. He made the right decision every time. He even was just incredibly patient on some of those where he sort of kept it as long as he could, forced the defense to collapse on him, and then pulled it in and ran in. And LSU couldn't adjust quickly enough to stop him. So he was incredible. If you look beforehand, I jotted this down. Before they made the quarterback switch, Texas A&M had 5 punts, a fumble, and a turnover on downs. I believe on their first 8 drives. And then after they made the switch, 4 touchdowns, a field goal, and then the half ended on their last 6 drives. So everything changed. Like you mentioned earlier, everything changed in that moment. Those 2 plays when Nussmeier threw the interception and then A&M swapped quarterbacks, ran it in for a touchdown the next play. Everything changed after that.
Yeah, and it sort of started to feel like even before you could tell how much things had changed. it started to feel like the sword of Damocles is kind of hanging over LSU after those two plays, because now you're in a game that's a 3-point game where it feels like LSU is dominating, but instead you're only up by 3. The crowd's back in it. You've missed 2 field goals. You feel like there's missed opportunities all over the place. Autry says good teams usually outcoach LSU. I wouldn't go that far. I think Brian Kelly's a good coach. It's sign of a good coach is they tend to get better as the season goes on. But they got out adjusted tonight, if that's a word. Mike Elko, as you said, clearly saw the need for that mobile quarterback. LSU was kind of crashing in on the pocket, and he said, boy, what's the antidote for that? Well, it's to get a mobile quarterback in there and run some read option and make them pay for crashing that pocket and get outside. And LSU, Blake Baker and his staff could not find the mid-game adjustment. They never did. They finally kept A&M to a field goal on their last drive, but by that point it's really too late, and the offense is in chase mode, and you don't want to be in 3rd and long against this Aggies defense, and that's what we saw happen.
Mike Elko, you made a great point. Mike Elko coached a great game. Making that quarterback switch is not an easy decision. It's a tough decision, especially in a game like this. Turning to a freshman in the second half, dropping him into that environment with the stakes and with the way LSU's defense was playing, that's a gutsy call, right? And I think we shouldn't gloss over the fact that, of course, he made the call because it worked out so well. I think that's a really tough decision, and it really paid off for him. Like you said, he took advantage of what the LSU defense was doing. The LSU's defense is aggressive. It blitzes a lot. It wants to create havoc. It wants to disrupt things. So it's always going full speed right into the pocket, trying to collapse the pocket and bring the quarterback down. And Ole Miss countered that by running the ball really well and then going, I guess, going between those rushers. Taking advantage of their over aggression and going right up the middle on them. So that was in hindsight, A&M was sort of built to take advantage of the way LSU's defense played, just because there's such a good rushing attack, right? They finished, and this is hard to believe, 49 carries, 242 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the ground. That's a lot. 49 carries is unbelievable. So yeah, we talked about this during the week, Zach, on Tuesday and Thursday. The thing was stop the run and run the ball, and LSU couldn't do either of those two things, and it lost big. So those 2 keys that we highlighted really stood out tonight.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, it's kind of amazing LSU was winning this game with how much they were getting bruised in the run game. But part of it was, if they could stop Texas A&M's run on 1st or 2nd down with Connor Wegman in the game, their pass rush was getting home and really affecting Wegman. And so again, you have Mike Elko, who's a defensive coach, seeing this, knowing what's going to cause problems and making the right adjustment. And LSU just had no answer at all. So lots to talk about. Keep your comments coming. We'll see if Wilson or Scott Rabalais or Koki Riley can join us from College Station a little bit later. First, we're going to take our break and let you hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back right after this.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
Welcome back to the LSU Insider postgame show here. Texas A&M 38, LSU 23. Showing your comments and questions live on the screen here with advocate LSU beat writer Reed Darcey, and just kind of dissecting this one and reliving it. I thought we talk about in-game adjustments. I thought LSU came into the game, Reed, with a really good plan. They seemed like crisp route running. Nussmeier was playing really well defensively. They were getting after Connor Wegman. This thing was going the way they wanted it to. And if anything, they probably should have been up more if you look at settling for a couple of field goal drives and then missing on 2 of those 3 field goals.
Yeah, let's talk about the field goals real quick because LSU attempted 4 field goals. They missed 2 of them, and then the third, they botched the snap. Peyton Todd wasn't ready for the snap, and it turned into a turnover on downs. Think about if LSU had hit those field goals, right? They'd have 9 extra points to work with, and if you think late in the game, A&M's up 35-23. So if LSU had 9 more points, it'd be 35-32, and LSU would have life again. So those field goal misses were huge, and those special teams miscues were huge. I'm not quite sure exactly what went wrong. It looked like a different problem on each one. It looked like the first one, the laces were kind of late to get spun out. It looked like on the second one, Ramos just flat out missed. The snap was a little high, but Peyton Todd got it down in time. And then the third, obviously, Peyton Todd, the holder, wasn't ready for the snap. So you can't have those kinds of plays in a game like this and expect to win, right? You need to be sharp, especially on special teams. So that's one of the many reasons why LSU lost tonight. They couldn't do the simple things. They couldn't do the easy things on special teams. They couldn't do that right.
Yeah, I think the snap may have been a little high on the first one too, which maybe was why the laces were out, the hold is rushed. But those were longer field goals too. Like, it happens. You're not going to make every single one of those. But the third one it almost looked like Peyton Todd. You see holders do this basically at any level of football, where they'll look back to the kicker to make sure he's ready, and then they'll look back to the snapper, and that's kind of the sign for the snapper to go ahead and start the play. Well, Peyton Todd did that, and then he did a double take, like he heard, like, did he hear something in a loud crowd that, like, Damian Ramos said, he thought he said something, and he looked back again, and then it was when he looked back the second time, the snap comes and hits him in the shoulder while he's not looking. And at that point in the game where, a field goal at least stems the tide of momentum and gets you kind of back to where, you feel like you're still in the game and it's still a back and forth. It would have been important. I mean, they still had the lead at that point. Actually, 17-14 would have made it 20-14, and you still kind of feel like, okay, we take a deep breath. Instead, you give them great field position. Damian Ramos actually heads up play to jump on that ball, because if he didn't, it could have been a scoop and score situation and really snowballed. But he did jump on the ball. But you give him great field position, and Texas A&M scored like 3 plays later, and all of a sudden you're behind instead of adding to the lead and kicking off and telling Marcel Reed, okay, you had that nice touchdown, but now you're a freshman in a big game. You're down by 6. Go show us if you can drive the ball 75 yards. They didn't get a chance to do that.
Yeah, LSU would have had a touchdown lead. If they had hit those first 2 field goals in the first half, they would have had a 3-score lead at halftime. And if they had hit the one in the third quarter where they botched the snap, the exchange, they would have been up by 6. So even if A&M comes down and scores on their next drive, their lead isn't as large as it would have been had LSU gotten that field goal. And maybe they don't score. Maybe LSU forces them into a punt because the field position isn't great. So this sort of felt like Brian Kelly's first year at LSU with the special teams miscues. It's been the special teams mistakes have gotten cleaned up over the last year and a half, but they came back tonight in the worst possible moment. And they really, it's not the sole reason why LSU lost this game, but it's one of the big factors behind it. I just think, like, looking big picture, like, LSU couldn't run the ball, and that kind of led to Nussmeier's struggles and his interceptions. And then the interceptions and the missed field goals, it put too much pressure on the LSU defense, right, which couldn't adjust quickly enough to defend this offensive switch that A&M made halfway through the game, and then the defense craters, and then LSU, there was more interceptions, and it just all spiraled pretty quickly, and it all started with the turnovers and the missed field goals. Just really sloppy play for LSU tonight.
Yeah, it's crazy. And those of you just joined us, you're watching the LSU Sports Insider postgame show for LSU Texas A&M. You can leave your comments or questions, and we will show them live on the air. Just ask that you keep them clean, and we can show those for everybody or respond to any questions. It is kind of funny, Reed. You talk about the mistakes, like from a box score perspective. If you broke this game down, LSU actually outgained Texas A&M by 53 yards. It was 429 to 376. They outgained them in yards per play, 5.9 to 5.4. They had 405 passing yards. And, we talked about the halftime stats. Nussmeier was on pace for over 500 passing yards in this game at halftime. LSU had a 17-7 lead. Didn't look like A&M was going to be able to cover LSU's receivers. He could have had more. Like, Chris Hilton had that ball in the end zone. He kind of mistimed his jump. He good news, he returned. Bad news, he was kind of rusty. Like, their passing game was humming in the first half. But in these big games, just gaining yards is not enough. You have to cash them in for points. LSU didn't do that. You can't turn the ball over. LSU did that. And you just, you got to come up with the big plays at the big moments. And that's what Texas A&M did. So Angela says sloppy coaching. Roberto says he's an A&M fan, but much respect for LSU. I tell you what, Reed, there was a point like early in the fourth quarter or even after LSU scored its final touchdown where you think, man, this game is setting up for a classic finish. And LSU just could not make a play on defense.
Yeah, it was after that touchdown drive that LSU had. God, I'm remembering wrong now. I believe it was probably in the fourth quarter. They came down and had 78-yard touchdown drive, right? Cut the lead to within one score, and you thought, okay, LSU's back in it. They struggled about as much as they possibly could have ever struggled in the third quarter. But Nussmeier responded to that and led a really sharp drive. He made some great throws on that drive. Aaron Anderson made a wonderful catch to put LSU down inside the 5, and then they capitalized with the tush-push touchdown a few plays later. That was a really impressive drive, and it gave you hope that, LSU's offense, they might have composed themselves here, and they might have figured something out. I think, like, it's just that play, that touchdown drive, and then it was followed up by the long completion that A&M had. I don't know how long it was, but LSU had the coverage bust where
45 yards.
Nobody took the receiver from the slot coming down the middle, and then Marcel Reed, to his credit, made a great throw, but LSU busted coverage there and then allowed him to run free down the seam, and that really set up A&M's another touchdown drive for A&M, which was really the backbreaker because LSU after that they couldn't respond to that. If they got to stop, maybe the game shifts, the tide of the game shifts again, but it didn't.
Yeah, 2 points to what you said, and I agree with everything you said. But first off, yes, they scored on the Nussmeier tush push. How hard was it to get the 2 inches they needed? I mean, that was how they were getting beat in the run game up front after the apparent touchdown pass to Green is overturned on review. I mean, they were inches short. Got an offside call to bring it even an inch closer, and then still barely got it. So that just kind of pinpoints the or spotlights the trouble they had running the ball. And then as you said, okay, they did score. They didn't get the 2-point conversion, but it's a 5-point game. There was 9:57 left. It took Texas A&M 4 plays and 1 minute and 48 seconds to go 75 yards. And that's like, it was just no resistance. It was, it was over at that point.
In the second half, LSU's defense played like the defense last year, where you sort of looked at them and you thought, okay, there's no hope here. They don't have a counterpunch to this, right? They can't, they're coverage busting in the secondary. They can't fit the run. They can't stop the same action over and over again, the read option, the runs up the middle. And once A&M really got its run game going, then that's the perfect antidote for the LSU pass rush. The pass rush is what the LSU defense does best, and because A&M ran the ball so well, LSU didn't have a quarterback to pressure, like they did so well in the first half against Connor Wegman. A&M did a great job of running the ball, and that really set the tone of the entire game, I think.
Yeah, I think, Craig, good comment here. You can't run the ball and get impatient offensively, and the opponent hangs around. Yeah, you're more likely to make mistakes when you're throwing all the time. I think Nussmeier was feeling his oats a little bit, on that 3rd and 2 play we talk about to change the game, and thought, I've been on point with everything tonight. Now I'm just going to throw this, and it gets picked off, a jump ball, and changes the game. And then like we said earlier, I think it changed his mindsets too. So I agree with that. Chris, Irish fan, glad you got Kelly and his family. I mean, look, I think there's like this LSU fan base. I don't know if they're ever going to accept Brian Kelly until he wins a national championship. And to that point, he's still fine. LSU still. I think most fans, if you told them they'd be 6-2 at this point in the season, probably going to take it. But let's talk. And I think Scott Rabalais just texted and said he's going to come on here in a minute. But and we'll get his thoughts too. But let's talk quickly about what's next, Reed, because LSU now has to kind of sit with this one for a bye week, and they've got 2 weeks to stew on it and wait for Alabama coming into Tiger Stadium, and that one sets up as absolutely an elimination game. It's like a play-in game for the play. I shouldn't say play-in because the winner's not automatically in, but the winner would be 3 expected victories away from at least being in the CFP conversation, whereas the losers just got no chance.
Yeah, I think even if LSU beats Alabama in 2 weeks, I think they probably still need a little luck to get in. Say they finished the regular season 10-2. That's on paper it seems like that's good enough to get them in. But again, you want that. You're losing control of your own destiny at that point, right? We said this wasn't an elimination game. This didn't. LSU, all of LSU's playoff hopes didn't hinge on this. But if it had won, then we'd really start the conversation about what this team will look like in the playoff, right? Because it would have been in the driver's seat to go to the SEC title game. Now, not only do you have to beat Alabama, but you have to win out. Like after Alabama, there are some manageable, winnable games on LSU's schedule. But that's a tough ask. Beating Alabama is no easy feat. You can't just pencil in 4 more wins and just say that you hope to get to the playoff, right? These 2 losses, the first one to USC, the second one to A&M, that's your margin for error. It's gone now. You got to be perfect now, and then maybe you need a little more luck to get in after that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, look, priority number 1 with a bullet is trying to find a way to beat Alabama, pick yourself back up, beat Alabama, who got back on track. They blew out Missouri today. But after that, then now the team's not really going to do this, but as a fan base, you have to start looking at, okay, what did BYU do today? What did Iowa State do? What did Clemson do? What did Penn State do? Like there's all these teams around the country, Notre Dame, which won at Texas A&M, which now kind of has that head-to-head comparison. And so you have to hope for some help and enough chaos elsewhere to where the committee takes some 10-2 teams are going to get in regardless, but like, is your 10-2, let's compare it to Georgia's 10. Let's say Georgia loses a game to Ole Miss. Well, they have losses to Alabama and Ole Miss, and at that in this scenario, they have a win over Texas and a win over Tennessee, and a win over Clemson. That's probably a better 10-2 than LSU's 10-2, especially if USC goes like 6-6 or 7-5 or something. LSU doesn't have a big win like Georgia had at Texas. So you need multiple 10-2 teams, multiple spots for 10-2 teams. And the only way you get that is if you can't have BYU and Iowa State both reach the Big 12 title game undefeated. You probably don't want Miami and Clemson to both reach the ACC title game with just 1 loss between them. And Pitt's also undefeated in that league. Like you have to start playing this game where there's musical chairs and there's only going to be so many left for 10-2 teams.
Yeah, and I think people are going to look back at this loss to A&M and they're going to say, yeah, A&M controlled this. They won pretty handily. It wasn't a close game that could have gone either way. So if you look at LSU's resume so far in totality, you've got the loss to USC, which looks really bad. And a couple months later after that, you've got the win over Ole Miss, which they barely beat Ole Miss. That game could have gone either way. LSU didn't lead until the very last play of the game in overtime. And now you've got this loss to A&M, which really wasn't all that close to the game. A&M really controlled things in the second half and raced out to a big lead. I think the committee's going to look back at this game and chalk it up to a big dominant Texas A&M win, right? So LSU's resume, it's got a few good SEC wins, but Right now, I don't think it's a playoff resume right now. I think beating A&M, that's absolutely a playoff resume. But losing the game the way they did, I don't think it's looking quite as good as it would have been had LSU won this game, obviously. So that's why we said this game was such a high stakes game, because whoever won got to go in the driver's seat, and they got to really take control of their destiny. But the loser didn't. Loser didn't get that chance. Now they got to win out and hope for some good fortune down the stretch.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of comments of people saying LSU eliminated itself and 10-2 dream on, like they're not going to get there. And they may not. I mean, winning 4 games in a row is hard. I don't care who you are. But it's also, if LSU beats Alabama in 2 weeks, the tone is going to change. Everybody's going to start talking about it and checking it out. And in college football, things change dramatically in just a couple of weeks. They can change dramatically. So I wouldn't give up hope yet. But obviously tonight was a big step in the wrong direction. So with that said, let's bring on Scott Rabalais, who's joining us live from the Kyle Field press conference. Scott,
You're right.
well, Scott,
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm like hearing 2 of you somehow. But
Do you have us on maybe on another window?
possibly. There we go.
Let me give you a second.
Oh, I know. There we go. I got you. There we go.
The wonders of modern technology.
Yes.
Scott Rabalais joining the LSU Insider postgame show live from College Station. A&M beats LSU 38-23. They outscored the Tigers 31-6 in the second half. First of all, just kind of your big picture thoughts after that one.
I wrote in my column, I've covered LSU since 1992. I can't think of many games ever where LSU was so much in control, and then things went so badly, for LSU. I mean, 2 quarters and the first 2 drives of the second half, they're in control of this game. And then all of a sudden it switched when Nussmeier throws an interception. They get it. They have another botched snap exchange on the field goal try. Then Texas A&M makes a desperation move to put in Marcel Reed at quarterback, and it was like LSU had never seen. It was like kryptonite. It was like they'd never seen a quarterback running the ball before. I ran to Jacob Hester after the game. He was leaving the press box. It reminded him, long-term fans will remember, the 2005 Tennessee game. LSU was totally in control. They put in Clausen, the backup quarterback, and then they came back and beat LSU in overtime. It was kind of like that. It was just like things went from day to night, and it was just unbelievable. And a part of the reason I hear what you're saying about people are reacting is a shocking defeat, because they looked like they were 1 score away from putting Texas A&M away, and then it all just imploded on them in a matter of a very few minutes.
Yeah, Reed and I were talking. It happened really in 2 plays. The interception by Nussmeier, who was never really the same after that. I thought
Right.
it wasn't just the interceptions, but even some of the other throws he was off on. He looked rattled. And then on the very next play, I'm sure they were planning to do this anyway, but Texas A&M brings in Marcel Reed. He scores in 1 play. He led 5 straight scoring drives as a redshirt freshman, which is incredible. I mean, it makes you wonder why he wasn't starting the whole time. Connor Weigman played a good game against Missouri, another pretty good one against Mississippi State. But this Reed kid, obviously a very dynamic, dual threat quarterback.
Yeah, and he started 3 games when Weigman was hurt earlier this season. It's not like you hadn't seen him. And I have not been out of the LSU locker room because of my deadlines, but I did hear Mike Elko, the Texas A&M coach, talking after the game, and he was asked, when did you think about putting him in? And he said, well, kind of at halftime, we started thinking about it. Then when they came out in the second half and they had 2 ineffective drives, they figured they had to do something, and obviously he was tremendous, and LSU just had no answer for him. It was just rather shocking. I'm writing and I'm thinking, like a lot of people, hey, this defense has really come a long way, and they have for the most part. They've really improved. They're getting pressure. They're playing much tighter coverage. Play the guys that would have been open last year, just wide open. They're pressing them up, and they're really doing a good job. And then they just have this. It just looked like everything went bad for LSU. It just was kind of shockingly so. And that was just, like I say, it wasn't just hitting the iceberg that sank the Titanic. It was a bunch of factors. And that's what happened tonight to LSU. Some bad stuff on special teams, Nussmeier's interceptions, and putting Marcel Reed in. They just didn't seem to have an answer for him on defense. And all added up to like you said, 31-6. That's incredible to think about.
Yeah. The other thing, Scott, that we talked about also, but Nussmeier wasn't good. They had no running game at all.
No.
LSU could not run the ball. It's hard to win in the SEC if you got to at least have the threat of it. And a little bit on the very first drive, their very first scoring drive, they were able to run the ball. After that, we're talking like single-digit yards for the rest of the game.
And 24 net yards rushing. Of course, that includes Nussmeier got sacked twice, which is only the second time he's been sacked all year, and he was sacked twice in the South Carolina game. So you factor that yardage in, 16 yards. So they ran for 40 yards, without the sacks. But still, that's bad. It's like what they did to our Arkansas last week. Arkansas had 38 yards rushing. You make a team one-dimensional, and it's something else Elko mentioned. Obviously, that's always the goal, right? To make a team one-dimensional. And LSU was having so much success with the passing game. Garrett threw for 405 yards in this game, and he had over 250 at halftime. And it seemed like they're getting by on it, but that's one of those things that eventually, if you don't get all the breaks, that could eventually come back to haunt you, and it certainly did LSU because they made them one-dimensional, and then they couldn't stop their run. A&M, LSU actually outgained A&M for the game, but the A&M had a 242 to 24 yard edge in rushing. That's hard to beat on the road.
Yeah. Rab, a couple of questions for you, and we don't want to be too reactionary on this show, but it is a reaction show, and we are getting reactions from fans, and the coach is always going to come under fire in this sort of situation. How much blame should Brian Kelly and his staff wear for a game in which, number one, you just completely lost control and could not turn things around, but number two, did not seem prepared for a quarterback who has played, as you mentioned, this season and has been effective? Like, at some point in meetings, I would think during the week it comes up that, hey, what if they bring in Reed? What do we do? They had no answer at all. So how much is it fair to lay blame at the feet of Brian Kelly and staff?
Some, but I think they also deserve credit for getting LSU to this point where you come into the last game in October and you're playing for first place in the SEC against Texas A&M. No one saw either of these teams being in this position, right? Going into November. And, they were, half a game away from being the lone unbeaten SEC team in SEC play. So you got to give him credit for getting to this point, for the defense improving, for Garrett Nussmeier being a mostly effective quarterback, for a lot of things. But at the same time, yes, they deserve some blame. It just looked like they, I'm sure they weren't unprepared, but it certainly looked that way. And special teams, which is gone from being a huge liability. Remember in 2022, it got better last year, and it's been better this year. So the snaps and the holds were just. It was just like, it was really bad. I mean, they had 3 field goal attempts that they made one. Ramos made an extra point basically early in the game, and then they couldn't do anything. So it was just, everyone deserves some blame. They say defeat is an orphan, but everyone deserves some blame. Nussmeier deserves some blame. The offensive line, which lost, Garrett Dellinger, of course, during the game. He didn't come back. I don't think he played at all in the second half. I could be wrong, but it was pretty much of that. And then on defense, just making mistakes and not able to make adjustments for this guy that, frankly, let's call it what it is. A&M made a desperate move. They had no other options because nothing was working for them, really. They had that one good drive in the first half. Nothing was working, and they're one score away from getting blown out by LSU, and then they put in Reed, and it goes the other way. So, there's plenty of blame to go around for players and coaches alike.
One more thing, Rab, and then we'll let you get going because I know y'all have to finish writing and then get out of there, and I think get back to Houston tonight. So we don't want to keep you all night, but just kind of looking forward now. Yeah. LSU does get a bye week to stew on this. I mean, you can always look at that one of two ways, like, hey, we'd rather get out and play again so that we can get this taste out of our mouths. But also, you mentioned Dellinger, and Nussmeier got banged up tonight too. Like the week off can also help you reset things. So kind of can go either way with that one. But this Alabama game now, it takes on a different tenor than a lot of these LSU Alabama games, and what's become really the SEC's classic rivalry is, instead of the winner being in control of national championship fate and all that sort of thing, this is a desperate elimination game now for both teams, where you're not getting into the college football playoff with 3 losses. You're just not going to. And you may not get in with 2, by the way, as Reed and I were talking about. But
certainly,
you have to win this one. You have to, and both teams know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always best. It's always hard right after a game, that especially one that LSU has lost, to have perspective. But you got to take the view, as I am from way above Kyle Field here in the press box. I take the view from up above, and the view up above is, what do we say? This was a 4-game stretch that was going to define their season. They beat Ole Miss. Maybe they're fortunate to win that game, but they won the game. They go on the road and pull out an impressive win at Arkansas. And then you come here and you lose, and now you got Alabama. So, if they still have a chance to win 3 out of the 4, and you thought, if they win 3 out of the 4, they've got a chance at the playoff. They got a chance at the SEC championship game. They only have 1 loss in conference. They've got a chance at the playoff. Does it look right now like they're a playoff team? Does it look right now that LSU is one of the 2 best teams in the SEC that belongs in Atlanta? No, it doesn't. But everyone has flaws this year in college football. This season, I don't know if it reminds y'all, but it reminds me of 2007 when LSU won the national championship with 2 losses. It reminds me of that kind of season. Everyone has flaws. Even number 1 Oregon, who's still undefeated, and Penn State, which I believe won tonight, right? Even those teams, have flaws, and everyone in the SEC has lost a game in or out of conference at this point. So you've got a chance. You go into November, you still have a chance. Well, should be favored against Alabama, Zach? You think? Probably not. Maybe a small.
I don't think so. Yeah, okay. Maybe a couple point underdog.
A couple point underdog, but it won't be a huge deficit. A huge difference either way, and then they'll probably be favored at Florida at home against Vandy and Oklahoma. So they've got a chance, and that's all you can ask for. Is their road more complicated? Is it littered with more teams that are in the way, more hurdles to overcome? It sure is, but it's about where you thought they could be at this point for a program that, when you look at the big picture, is still trying to grow and mature into one of the national big boys, a la Georgia or Ohio State or Oregon.
Yeah, and I think that's where frustration comes from, is that they're not quite to that point, and this is why you get paid the big bucks, Rab, because it's to keep that in perspective. The goal was to win 3 of these 4 games and to keep your season alive. They've won 2 of 3. Now it kind of comes down to that Alabama.
Sure. And if you started this and said that's the bargain, do you take it? I think most LSU fans would take it. Yeah, you want to win every game, obviously, but if you're realistic at it kind of reminds me of an NFL season, doesn't it, guys? I mean, these were 2 very similar teams, very very close in talent level and ability. And A&M's not a great team either. They're not going to win the first national championship since before World War II this season. I mean, they're just not. But they were kind of similar. It's kind of grind it out, and someone gets the edge, and they kind of pull away, and that's what happened. If this game was in Tiger Stadium, maybe it would have been different. But it's where college football is this season, and LSU is. They're in the mix. They're not terrible. People say this is a terrible team. No, it's not. Brian Kelly's doing a terrible job. No, he's not. But they're still growing and work to do to be where you want to be, which is, like you were in 2019 or 2007 or 2003.
Where LSU wants to be, that team doesn't lose to USC in the season opener, right? You talk about this 4-game stretch defining the season. You can't forget about the loss to USC.
No, it becomes much more acute. I mean, the wins and losses become much more important because you lost that game. Yeah, if LSU was sitting here right now, 7-1 and 3-1, it'd be very much different. But it's not. Yeah, you lost the game, and the USC has looked like they're not very good, which you kind of thought they would be. I looked at them. I was like, that's maybe a 7-5 team, and maybe LSU's got a couple more losses left on the schedule. Maybe they split these last 4. Wouldn't be a shock. They wind up 8-4, but they could wind up at 10-2 as well. And we're going to see where they are. But all is not lost. And I think a little perspective. Maybe the open date comes at a good time in terms of that.
Yeah. All right. He's Scott Rabalais joining us live from College Station. Scott, we appreciate it, and we will talk to you on the LSU Sports Insider later this week.
All the best, guys. Thanks. Take care.
Drive safe.
All right, so that was Scott Rabalais joining us from Kyle Field. We'll see Wilson Alexander, Koki Riley are there too, but they're writing on deadline. So we're going to stick with you maybe another 10 minutes or so. And if one of them happens to hop on, we will pick his brain and see. They may have been down to the LSU locker room and can give us some live reaction and how the Tigers reacted to this one too. I thought Rab brought up one really good point Reed, and look, people don't like to lose. LSU has a proud history. The fans are used to winning. They don't like to lose anyway. But to me, I think part of it is the reason this is so hard to keep in perspective is how LSU lost. They had, when you look at like 9 minutes left in the third quarter and you go, oh man, we're up 17-7. A&M can't move the ball. They don't have a first down in the second half. Surely we're going to score 10 more points in this game, and that's all it's going to take. And now look at us. We're 7-1 and on our way to the college football playoff. And then, like we've been saying, 2 plays later, it all changes, and you're kind of sitting there with like slack jawed the rest of the game. Like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, I'm seeing some comments pop up on the screen. I think LSU fans are frustrated right now. I think they're frustrated because most of LSU's mistakes were self-inflicted. I mean, most of these things that led to LSU's downfall tonight, it was self-inflicted errors. The missed field goals, the interceptions. You can say whether the run game was LSU being bad or Texas A&M being good. It's probably both, but they controlled 2+ quarters of this game, and they showed you what they were capable of playing like, and then it all changed. So I think LSU fans, they saw that they got a glimpse of what it could look like in the first half. And then they lost that glimpse pretty quickly, and so I think that's why people are so frustrated.
Yeah, it's a frustrating loss, and things we've talked about, the missed field goals, throwing a ball up for grabs that Garrett Nussmeier didn't need to throw, not being ready for a dual threat quarterback, and that is we can sit here and say, why didn't you make an adjustment? It's hard because you're trying to get a bunch of 19 to 22-year-olds to play a certain way, and you coach them all week to play a certain way, and they're executing it beautifully. And then all of a sudden in the middle of the game, you get 5 minutes on the sideline to say, oh, forget all of that. We got to play this way. We got to go out and execute it against other big, fast, strong dudes.
A&M's offense came out after Nuss threw that first interception, and they put a completely different offense out there. It was almost like it was a completely different team, So, credit to them for being nimble enough to make that switch and being prepared enough to make that switch. LSU wasn't ready for it, clearly, right? So that was really impressive for them to pull that off. It was really tough to pull that off, and I think you can see that in the juxtaposition of how LSU struggled to make that switch once A&M made the switch. So that's coaching right there.
I gotta say, I also got to give some credit to Marcel Reed, because I'm thinking particularly of it. I believe it was his third touchdown, where he had the ball in the belly of Le'Veon Moss so deep that I couldn't believe they did not fumble on the play. I mean, the cameraman was fooled. I was fooled. My son was watching the game. He was fooled. And we all go, oh, they finally bottled the read option up and got Le'Veon Moss for a loss. And meanwhile, Marcel Reed's just walking into the end zone. I mean, I could not believe how deep he had that ball. You don't see a mesh point that deep very often on the read option. And so if he's able to do that consistently, he's going to have a special career.
Think about the poise that takes. think about that. Like in that moment when the defense is collapsing on you, when whoever it was,
Le'Veon Moss was being tackled while the ball was still in Le'Veon Moss's breadbasket, but also in Marcel Reed's hands. It was incredible.
I don't remember the LSU defender who it was who was in on the play, but I'd imagine it was a very big, scary dude coming in at full speed on you. And to be a freshman at that point in such a big moment, such a big game, such a big point of the season, and to have the composure just to leave it in just long enough and then pull it out and then run in. I mean, that's unbelievable, and that's credit to him. Kudos to him. That was an unbelievable play.
It's high risk, high reward. I mean, if he left that ball in for a split second longer, it probably gets knocked out of there. And maybe LSU gets a turnover that changes the game back around the other way. I mean, it's hard to say. It's the old Jim Mora coulda, woulda, shoulda line, but it's you do have to give him some credit on that. Reed, let's spend about 5 more minutes. Let's talk about this, because you can react to frustrating losses, and we can all say, "Oh, the season's over," and maybe we look back at the end of the year and say that it's either this loss or the USC loss, and that's what cost LSU its chance at the college football playoff. What are the big picture things that concern you about this LSU team, or even if you want to go bigger picture about the LSU program under Brian Kelly right now? Because for me, it's the rushing offense. at least for this season. I just think it is very difficult to go very far if you cannot at least threaten that you're going to run the ball. And we haven't seen that pretty much all year from LSU. We did see it a bit last week, bit against South Carolina, a bit against South Alabama, I guess, but it just hasn't been consistent enough for me. Is that where you go to, or do you have another concern?
That was the first place my mind went to. It's been tough this whole year trying to figure out why LSU has struggled to run the ball so much. When you think about just how good that offensive line is, you've got all kinds of returning production. You've got 2 first-round picks at tackle. It just seems like you should be able to run the ball, and LSU's been exceptional in pass protection. They've been the best pass protecting offensive line in the country, but it's sort of a mystery of why they can't open enough rush lanes consistently for the LSU backs. I mean, Brian Kelly talked a little bit about it last week, where he sort of said it's kind of been a whack-a-mole type issue, like I mentioned Tuesday on the podcast, where you solve one thing, whether it's the blocking, you solve that problem, but then it becomes a different problem with the backs not seeing the hole, and then you solve that problem, but there's another problem that crops up. It's been really inconsistent, and I'm not quite sure exactly how to exactly what to blame for that. It's really puzzling, because given the talent on LSU's offensive line, that they should be running the ball better. And maybe it's because they tried to change from the majority zone kind of rush scheme that they ran so well last year. Now they're trying to do more of a gap kind of man kind of scheme. Maybe something got lost in that switch. Maybe they didn't coach it well enough, teach it well enough. It didn't work well enough. I don't know. It's something that has really confused me all year. I thought they might have turned a corner after watching them against Arkansas last week. Clearly, that wasn't the case. It sort of got back to where we started after USC, talking about how they couldn't run the ball, and it's probably the most confusing part about this team, I think.
Yeah, and like I've seen people say, "Oh, the red zone offense is not good." Now that's part of the running game. So that's where the passing game becomes really difficult, when the space shrinks, the vertical space shrinks, and you can't run the ball. So it's pretty tough. I was just looking up red zone stats, and LSU's 85th in the country coming into tonight in red zone scores. I think they scored every time they got in the red zone tonight, at least with a field goal, but the 2 field goal misses were outside the red zone. But even in touchdown percentage, they're pretty low down. And so it's all kind of connected. I do think the defense has gotten better. I mean, as far as big picture concerns, it's just like Scott said, it's hard not to be reactionary after a game. I wouldn't say this program is in any sort of deep trouble, but obviously still some issues that they're having trouble solving.
We went through it 3 years ago when we saw a program in deep trouble. The last couple Ed Ogeron years, you could tell that program was really starting to spiral. That's not the case. We'll just look at how much LSU improved from the season opener until this game. Look at just how they won close games. They beat South Carolina. It was a tough, gritty, character building win. They beat Ole Miss on the last play. That was a super impressive as well. Those are signs of a program that's on the right trajectory, right? You went into a tough road environment tonight. You lost. You got beat. Yes, you made some critical mistakes, but again, this is the SEC. If you look at LSU's schedule, it just seems like you're playing in the SEC. You have to pencil in 1 or 2 losses, right? And if you need to win at least 10 games to get into the playoff, then you have to win the rest of your non-conference games. So I just keep going back to the USC game, and I just think of the missed opportunity there. If LSU had won that game, I think the entire complexion of the season is totally different. Now, you may disagree with me on that. Wilson might disagree with me on that. I just think like that loss to USC might be the most important aspect of the season. It might be what's keeping them out of the playoff.
I mean, we talked about it before the season, like how crucial that game was, and we talked about it right afterward. Like now your margin for error is basically gone, because, as you say, Georgia's lost an SEC game, Texas has lost an SEC game. The only team that hasn't is Texas A&M, and they've still got to play Texas. And by the way, talk about A&M, like they got to go to South Carolina next week. As LSU fans know, that's not easy. As Alabama fans know, that game was in Tuscaloosa. That team will battle you. And A&M coming off of a big emotional win, they're gonna have their hands full in Columbia, South Carolina next week. So it's not easy anywhere you go. And I guess I would just say, Reed, as we can wrap things up here, it's a disappointing night for LSU, and it's again, talked about it all year, 9-3 and missing the playoff. I think most people will be disappointed, but I also think that's not necessarily way below what LSU's expectations for the season should have been. I mean, you lost the Heisman Trophy winner, for God's sake. Your defense had to get better, and it has. But big picture, I just don't think we can sit here and say it's time to panic and this program is going in the wrong direction.
Not quite ready for that conversation just yet. No, I think we're totally in agreement there. You want to see them building on it. I think it's a disappointment if they miss the playoff. I did pick them to go 9-3 before the season. That's shaping up to what it's probably going to, end up like now. I'm just looking ahead at the schedule. I can't help but notice LSU has Vanderbilt on the schedule. Zach, Vanderbilt gave Texas a game today. We thought that's an easy win for LSU. I'm not so sure. You got Alabama and Vanderbilt, two SEC juggernauts left on the schedule.
Yeah, and I guess I would just remind people again, this disappointing game, and you hate to lose these things, and it's like tasting bile in your mouth, like you just hate it. But LSU probably should have lost to South Carolina. They found a way to win. They certainly could have lost to Ole Miss and found a way to win. And so it kind of goes both ways. You play in a bunch of 50-50 games, and sometimes they're going to bounce your way, and sometimes they're not. And tonight it didn't, and understand that's tough to deal with. So we wish everybody a happy and safe evening, and we'll be back with the LSU Insider Podcast. Not sure what our bye week schedule will be, and we do have to talk some basketball at some point.
Oh yes, yeah. That basketball season starts not this week, but the next week. The Alabama week is going to be a very busy week for us. So yeah, that's we have to talk basketball at some point.
So that'll be our LSU Insider Podcast schedule this week. Just subscribe to the YouTube channel, the LSU Sports at NOLA.com YouTube channel. If you do that, just click the little, if you're watching on YouTube right now, just click the little icon. You can subscribe to the channel, sign up for notifications. And then when we do have a new pod, you will be the first to know. And we will do our best to get you the best LSU coverage as we have for decades at the Advocate, this time in podcast form. So our thanks to Scott Rabalais for stopping by. Our thanks to our sponsor, Waste Pro. And he's Reed Darcey. I'm Zach Ewing. And this has been the LSU Insider Postgame Show.